Okay, welcome everyone. We are continuing with our interview series. I am Dr. Katrina Kreider, chiropractor here at A Touch of Health, and today I'm very excited for this interview guest. She has been a longtime friend of mine. We have known each other for probably 15 years. She has been not only a friend, but she is a healer that I seek out and that I continue to have healings from, because I just find her work so powerful and so transformative in my life. And I am so excited that we get to talk to her today. And today we're going to be talking about trauma. And this is my good friend, Jan Mitchell. She is an energy practitioner and she is a non-dual Kabbalistic healer. And she is just wonderful. And I'm welcome, Jan.
Thank you, Dr. Katrina. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad to be here. It's interesting. I was laughing earlier thinking about talking about trauma. It's like, oh, I'm so excited to be talking about trauma. And yet trauma is usually not something you laugh about.
No.
But I think you do end up laughing about it once you come through it. You know, once you come through and heal and work with it, you can then look back and be more lighthearted. Yeah.
Yeah. So before we get started on our trauma talk, Jan, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Well, I'm a native Georgian, and I've been working in the healing arts for about 18 years now. Started out as a reflexologist and then became an aromatherapist, and then, different other modalities started unfolding for me, like the non-dual Kabbalistic healing, and I'm a Reiki practitioner, energy healer, and also a medium channel. So with the mediumship, people often ask, what does that mean? And I simply say it's talking to dead people. I love talking to the dead people. They're so interesting what they share with me. Yeah. And channeling is usually messages from spirit, and all of it I view as healing. It's all very, very healing. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'll likely share this in my mom's group, and you and I had joked on the title of Heal Your Trauma, Mama.
Yeah, Heal Your Trauma, Mama. Yes.
So let's talk about trauma. So the first question I have is, do you think that trauma can be avoided, or is it just part of the human condition?
It's twofold. I think some trauma can be avoided, and some of it is part of the human condition. Yes, I definitely believe both. One, let's see, when it's trauma that is a part of the condition of being human, it tends to happen, early on in childhood, or even in utero, it can happen. Or it can be from family lineage, karma, different patterning in the family system that can be brought forward into a person being born. So those are one way where, it's part of the human condition. But then the part that could be avoided is when we do wake up to our trauma and we're trying to be kinder to ourselves and to others. We can, if we choose the kinder route, even if we're being direct and honest with people, we can still be kind in the way we deliver it, the message, without losing the meaning of the message and not traumatize the other person. But now, if the other person is not awake to their own trauma, they may feel traumatized when someone speaks their truth to them. They may take it personally when it's not meant that way.
Can you give us an example of the first part where you talked about the family, like can you give us what would be an example of a lineage trauma within a family system? Because I actually believe, it's stored in your DNA, passed down from generations, right? So it's
Right.
in the fiber of your being. And yeah, so can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, I can. Two that come to mind. One is alcoholism. That is one that can be passed down from generation to generation until someone in, let's say, the current lifetime decides that they're going to take it upon themselves to really work it out for their entire lineage. Another one could even be mental illness. And also a third one that comes up, which I relate to more, is sexual trauma, sexual abuse. And I do, for me personally, that was in my lineage. And I was also abused from ages 4 to age 12. And I took it upon myself to begin the process of doing the deep healing work to heal that, not only for myself generationally, but also for my daughter and her future generations. So not only backwards, but it goes forwards as well.
I love that,
Yeah.
because I don't feel like we really talk about that piece of healing trauma, of how it really does like ripple within the family unit.
Yes, it does ripple within the family unit, and you can choose to treat it like the elephant in the room, which means you don't do anything about it and it just gets bigger and bigger. Or you can one day just wake up and say, I've had enough of this, and I'm suffering, and I really want to work with that suffering and heal it. And you can actually heal your relationship, and it actually heals all the way back generationally and forwards, just like I said, backwards and forwards. Because time for humans is linear, but in the universe, it isn't linear. There is no time and space, universally speaking. Yeah.
Um, oh, I just had a question. It popped out.
Yeah.
Pop back
Oh,
in. Oh, I would like, so don't you think that traditionally, like when you were little and you had that happening, it was more of a nobody talked about anything? Because, you know, you kind of mentioned sexual trauma. And if we think about the last couple years with the Me Too movement, it's almost like there's been this mass awakening to the trauma, right? And to bring voice to it.
yes. I mean, it has taken me years of doing deep personal healing work to be able to talk about it, and even be able to talk about it with a smile on my face, because it no longer defines who I am. It's a way of rewriting your story by working through that trauma and actually healing it, healing your relationship to it. Yeah, it's very, very powerful work. And most of the way I worked with my own personal trauma was through receiving non-dual Kabbalistic healings on a regular basis. And also at times I did work with therapists, but I went back to the non-dual Kabbalistic healing. And then also the energy healing work. I worked with different shamanic practitioners and other energy healers to help me on my journey. Yeah.
So are there different types of trauma?
To me, I mean, trauma can occur at the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual levels. Because when I think about trauma spiritually, I think about people who are going through what traditionally might be called a midlife crisis. But really, to me, they're waking up spiritually. So they might, say, be married and all of a sudden realize they are not in the right situation, that they no longer need to be married. So it can be very traumatizing to a person to have to claim themselves in a relationship like that, where it's no longer working for them, and to actually say, hey, I've got to make a different choice here. I have to end this marriage, whatever it might be. But that also was part of my personal path in claiming myself, beginning to claim myself. Yeah.
Can spiritual trauma also occur, like maybe being part of like an organized religion or something
Yeah.
like that?
Yes.
You know, you think about some of the like, there's so many different ones, and yeah, lots of.
That's true. It's so totally true. I know a lot of people who are recovering. They'll say they're recovering Catholics. You know, I didn't grow up in Catholicism, but I know people who did. But even the religion I grew up in just didn't match up with how I was feeling on the inside, and I had to break away from that. You know, if it works for other people, it's great, but for me it did not work to continue on in organized religion. It actually messed with my mind quite a bit. Yeah, so I actually stopped that.
So let's talk about, I think physical trauma is like a lot easier to see.
Yes, physical trauma. I can choose an easy example if you want to, easier, because I know the sexual trauma can get pretty deep, and that's also physical, but it also has emotional implications and mental implications, and spiritual implications. I mean, all of them kind of interconnect, right? Because when I'm just going to say this, when you're sexually abused, you think that there's something wrong with you, that you're defective in some way. And a lot of times the people who are abusing you are telling you those things, and you're a little kid and you don't know any different. And you think that whatever God is doesn't love you because they haven't saved you from the awful thing that's happening to you. So that's kind of the way, a brief example of interaction that way from sexual trauma. Just another type of physical trauma, I have a really good friend and client who recently had asked me, she's got some energy that's in her right leg and she's having difficulty getting it to move, and asked me if, when I was channeling, if I would see if I got any messages for her about how to clear that energy. And so I did. I was writing one day and I was like, hey, how, what can help my friend's leg? And then I got on the phone with her a couple of days later and I said, hey, I was channeling and I got some information about your leg, like how to help clear that energy. And she said, what was it? And I said, well, you need to go barefooted. You need to stand barefooted out on the ground and on some pebbles and walk around, especially pebbles ground. And, maybe even wade in a creek might be good for you. And she said, I don't go barefooted. I wear socks. I don't go barefooted. And I said, well, the message was you need to go barefooted. And then she tells me the story of when she was a young kid. They were burning some debris outside in the yard. She had on a pair of sandals, and some of the embers from the fire got in between the bottom of her foot and the sandals, and it burned her. So from that point on, she wore socks. And in that moment of us talking, she had an aha moment of like, oh my gosh, like that, wow. Okay, so I've been telling myself I need to have something on my feet at all times so they don't get burned. And really, if I had been barefooted and not wearing those sandals when I was younger, I probably wouldn't have gotten burned because I would have taken my bare foot and moved it. So, that's a simple, but it had an emotional impact on her and created a story that she needed to have her feet protected at all times.
Yeah, like for safety. It's like
Yeah.
her mind was telling her that it was not safe to go barefoot, that she needed to wear socks.
Yeah, and then she has me going, okay, well, this is what I got. They said you need to go barefooted and you need to walk around in the dirt. So she laughed. We both had a big good belly laugh out of that one. And she gave me permission to share that, by the way.
Oh, I love that. Can we talk about like emotional or mental trauma? Because I think that's like sometimes just a little harder to see than an actual physical thing happened to me.
Yes.
I am traumatized because of this. So therefore, because there's no physical piece of it, I think sometimes there's harder time finding it or figuring out what it was or is.
That's true. So what's coming to mind in you asking about that piece is how some kids were told by their parents, you're being lazy. Like, you're being lazy. Get up and make yourself useful. That would have been one of the things in my household of like, if you're not going to be busy doing something, then I'll put you to work, or you're being lazy. And then you grow up and you have a really difficult time connecting, in life and maybe figuring out what your path is because you feel unworthy. That it affects your self-worth, being told that you're lazy or that you're a good for nothing nobody. And that's just not true. That's incredibly difficult to shake off, to work with, to be told that. And I know that's a very simple one. I mean, there are many others, verbal things that, if you can't say something nice,
yeah.
don't say.
I was going to say another good example would be Boys Don't Cry.
Yes.
That's a great one for, yeah.
It's a great one. It even applied in my household to the girls. No one in my household was allowed to cry, except my mother. So she was the one who controlled all the emotions in the house at the time. Yeah. So it's very emotionally challenging to work with those types of traumas, and yet they affect us mentally and emotionally, and then also spiritually again, and physically. Because spiritually we are, maybe we feel like we're not connected to God, that God really, whatever God is, doesn't love us because we're unlovable, because we're lazy, or because we didn't do anything with our lives, like become a doctor, or a lawyer. Got to be one of those to be successful, and that's just not how life is, really.
Well, and I feel like more so, the more we talk about the physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, I don't feel like they're as separate. I feel like they're all intertwined, but maybe one is a little more prominent.
Right.
Right.
I can give you an example, just a little piece of my own sexual trauma, because the most difficult piece for me to overcome was when I was raped when I was 11, and I dissociated, and I actually made up a story. So I had no memory when I left that experience of what had really happened to me. And then you fast forward to, I think I was like 52 or 3 in the Kabbalistic healing program. And this was back in 2009. And I was doing a meditation because I wanted to remember what happened to me, because I had a blank, it felt like a 2-week period. And I remembered bits and pieces, but not that part of it, only about how I didn't want to go back to the school. That was the only thing I remembered. And at the same time that year that I was doing the meditation to try to remember, and I did recover the memories. It was kind of horrible, but now I'm really grateful for it because it freed me up more to be my true self. But at the same time, I was developing something called a Morton's neuroma in my right foot.
I remember.
And it's where yeah, you probably remember, it's where the nerve endings come together in between a couple of the toes, and it really stings and burns. And it kept getting bigger and bigger, and I was buying different shoes, and I even went to orthotics, anything to try to work with it so I wouldn't feel any pain from that foot, in my right foot. And then it wasn't until 2000, I think 17, when the Me Too campaign was very active and people were sharing their stories. I had an appointment with the shamanic practitioner at your office. And I remember I had bought this pair of boots, and they were low-heeled and everything, and I had worn them to the office to see clients. And by the time I went in to see her, my foot was burning and stinging. And I walk in, and she's like, "What's going on?" And I said, "My foot, I'm not even wearing heels, and it's burning and stinging." And she asked me, "When did it start?" And all of a sudden, it all came back to me like, oh my gosh, this neuroma started when I was trying to remember what happened to me, like the two, yeah. So both physical, it had become physically manifest in my foot, but then I was able to release it in that one session with her and healed it completely that day. So that very much a miracle in my life.
Amazing.
Thanks. I loved it. I was like, oh my gosh.
There's some books out there called like Your Body Talks, and I work with people's bodies and symptoms, and I do find it very fascinating. I don't think everybody, when they come into the office, tries to put like this is when this happened, that this started to hurt. And sometimes I feel like there's so many layers to it. It's not just one thing.
It's not. There are a lot of layers to it, but it's just so, this is when I'm just so filled with gratitude when I'm able to make the connection like I did in that moment. And then the whole physical issue was healed pretty much instantaneously. That day it was instantaneous. It came back a couple of times after, but then it was completely gone within a couple of weeks. And now I can wear high heels, and yeah, it's fascinating. So that's what I mean when you come through the other side. It's like a camel going through the eye of a needle, which is really hard, and it's painful and it's hurtful, and there's a lot of crying and anger and rage and all the emotions. But then when you come out the other side, you do feel better. You feel lighter, and you feel like you are you own your own dominion, yourself.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, you actually said something when we first started talking that
Mhm.
made me really think about one of the sayings that I really love is the only way out is through. Because I
Yes.
think often how we talked about in the past, right, where it's like boys don't cry or like you didn't tell anybody, it's just like keep it inside, shove it down, and then we all become these walking human pressure cookers where someone just looks at you one day and you absolutely lose it.
Yes, absolutely. And that's from years and years and years of being conditioned the way you think society wants you to be, or culturally you're expected to be. And that's not how we're meant to be. We're meant to be our own unique individual selves. I've always told people that how we look, as unique as we all look on the outside, I mean, because we all look very unique, very different. We are that way on the inside, and there isn't one technique that can be applied across the board, because if that were true, everybody would be able to heal very quickly, right? So it's very individual for each person on their journey to aligning with their truest self, or their unfolding to that.
Okay, so yes. However, okay,
However,
so would you agree? Like, so as a human being, you have your own individual trauma. But then we also have collective trauma depending on like certain groups that you're part of. So if you think about like all women, we have
yes,
collective trauma, right? I would say like certain other countries, right? Like they are also going through like a collective trauma. There's so many instances where yes, we are separate and we are unique and individual, but we're together.
Absolutely. There's that piece too, that component. It's very complicated. You can tell it's not black and white. It's very, very gray.
So how do you think the collective trauma affects the human being?
Oh, it weighs us down like like a heavy metal blanket. It just weighs us down. And you can take even the Me Too, right? That campaign. And it's not a campaign, but people started coming out, and the more they talked about it, the more other people came out and started talking about their personal experiences, both men and women who
Yes.
had been sexually abused, traumatized. Um, yeah, like amazing. And to me, the more we do our individual work, it helps to heal the collective. So whatever group we might be part of or connected into, I believe that even for, say, alcoholism and even for addiction, that the more an addict actually works on their own personal addictions, it actually heals the collective. It's pretty fascinating. Yeah, pretty fascinating. Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely one of those cases, though. If you think about, I think right now with what's going on in the world, we get so caught up in all the stuff that's happening, and we're like, I don't know what to do, right? And so
Right.
the focus really is you, whether it's collective trauma or personal trauma.
Right, because your personal self is the only self you can control,
Yeah.
if you want to call it controlling, but that's the only one you can work with. We can only choose to work with ourselves. I became really acutely aware of staying in my own lane came to me at the end of 2018. And so 2019, I thought every time I feel a judgment about a person, and it could be a simple thing like, oh, I don't like the way their hair looks or whatever, their haircut or their makeup or this or that, I just heard it and was really kind to myself. And that kind of stuff does not need to be spoken to outside your head, body, wherever it comes in.
Do you think those
Yeah.
judgments that we have are really of other people, or do you think that they are of ourselves when we make those critiques?
I think it's really of ourselves. It's an out picturing. We're trying to project it onto someone else. But when you wake up and you realize how much your own internal judgment there is, that is wow, what a wild ride that is, an awakening that is. And really, it really is fear. It's judgment. All judgment is really fear of somebody being different, looking different, acting different, because you might not be able to relate to it. So therefore you might be fearful of being around them.
Or like, don't you think like fear of separation? Like,
Yeah.
you know, fear of like loss of connection. Because to me, I think, right, like when you're connected
Yes.
with yourself, when you love yourself, that's like the basis of where it comes from.
Yes. Yes. I have another thought. It just left though, but it'll come back too. I love when that happens. It's like, man, I'm just gonna let it go. I'm just gonna let go. But around fear, yeah, it's fear really is to me the basis of a lot of trauma that does occur in the world. And when COVID hit, people really went into fear mode.
Yes.
I noticed it because I could feel it as an empath. I could feel it collectively. And I could even feel my own individual. And for me, my hope was, and still is that people will start working their own fear versus projecting it onto other people, because I've seen a lot of the projection of, oh, you're not wearing a mask, or you are wearing a mask. Either way, it's on both sides. And it comes from splitting into us and them. And that was my point around the fear, was about that. We split. And because it upsets our identity to have somebody bring in a different view or a different way of being. So we feel threatened. Our ego does anyway. It feels threatened and it wants to recoil or be defensive. And it's it's a continued process for me anyway, to be open-hearted and not feel so defensive, and try not to feel defensive, but ask curious questions.
So how then do you, as an individual, work on healing the fear?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's a process, because there's a lot of
time do we have?
I know, yeah. We don't even have enough time for all that. I mean, really, honestly, to notice what's going on within yourself, and working with different practitioners, whether it's a therapist or a healing practitioner like myself, work with other people to get their insights and their wisdom. And not to say that their wisdom is going to get rid of your fear. I don't believe you can get rid of fear anyway. I think what happens is we learn to walk with the fear. We learn to face the fear. And a lot of the reason that I also feel that humans are fearful, we do not like walking in the unknown. We want everything known. That was one of the things I absolutely did not love in the corporate world, was when I would be in a job interview and they would say, where do you see yourself in 5 years and 10 years? And if they only knew what was going through my mind at the time. But the truth is, to be known by whatever God is, we have to keep seeking to know everything. We have to allow ourselves to be in the unknown.
And it's being comfortable with the uncomfortable, and I think nothing has made it more apparent than the year 2020.
Yes, nothing has made it more apparent.
That we must be comfortable with the uncomfortable. The kind of what you just talked about leads me to my next question.
Sure.
You're talking about like having this awareness, and I want to know, can trauma create patterns in your life? And if it can, how can you be aware of that?
Yeah. Okay. So trauma does create patterns in your life, in everyone's lives. And it depends on the trauma, of course, as to what pattern is going to get created, right, from it. So I won't talk to it specifically, but just know definitely. Yeah, the second part of the question is really, it's going to be individual to each person as to how they wake up to it. Like for me, okay, well, I'm going to use me because, hey, here I am. I can talk about it. Fragmented memories or partial memories can be the breadcrumb trail back to the trauma. Like for me, when I mentioned about the rape, there was like a 2-week span where I wasn't eating and I wasn't talking and I was crying and I was literally, like in a fetal position, and I did not want to go back to the school. I did not know why when I was asked, and of course my mother, doing the right thing, took me to the family doctor who proclaimed that I was fine. There was nothing wrong with me to make me go back, to force me to go. So it was that memory of what happened, that experience, that was my piece of popcorn
Well, and it's
leading me
almost
back.
like it unravels like
Yeah,
like knitting yarn,
it does.
like a slow unravel.
That is beautiful metaphor for it. I mean, literally, yes.
Yeah.
Piece of yarn unraveling. I mean, that is a lot of life. Yeah, we're traumatized, and then we're given the opportunity to wake up to the trauma, to notice it. People may just one day wake up and say, gosh, I'm angry. Why am I so angry? And that's the popcorn right there. The moment you ask that question, like for me, it was like, gosh, I wonder what really happened that, kept me out of school for 2 weeks. What was that really about? And I have other examples. That's just the one that came to mind. But yeah, definitely, I'm angry. Or to notice, gosh, I'm really judging people. Gosh, I even went through a period of that, a long period of that, and then realized that, oh my gosh, I am steeping in self-judgment, and pulled it back in and started noticing when a judgment would come up. And that was all I would do, notice the judgment and be kind to myself. But I didn't say the judgment to the other person, like, I hate your hair. No, that, if somebody wants to wear their hair a certain way, they need to be able to wear their hair a certain way. They don't need my commentary or approval.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I think awareness is like so important, and just kind of, I think we're all going, we all have collective trauma, but I also feel like the things like the Me Too movement have really helped me to see that we are all going through collective awakening as well.
We
And
are.
yeah, which is so exciting, because I feel like the universe is asking us to heal this. And especially as a mom, I did a lot of healings before my kids were born, and now I do them even, more, because I want to heal more.
Right. Yeah, and that's why I do feel strongly that it is part of the human condition that even our children are going to be traumatized by us. I mean, we're going to lose our temper. There were a few times with my daughter, one of the simple changes I made when I had a child was that I was determined I was never going to spank her, that was not going to be part of the solution. So it was more, I used more time out, or I would maybe take something away, for a day or two and give it back. But yeah, and there were a couple of times I remember where I'm like, oh gosh, I kind of just want to go to that pattern of spanking, but
Yes.
I made it. I didn't, but she probably got yelled at a few times.
Yeah.
Maybe many times. So
Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, back when I had her, I was still in the corporate world. So a lot of times I was really in a hurry in the morning, and I didn't even give her time to get dressed. I was just like in the room dressing her, to get ready to go to the car. So I'm pretty sure her little body, mind, spirit rocked all of that energy of like, yeah, my mom's rushing me to be here and there and everywhere now.
Okay, so you said grokked. I know what that means, but
Oh yeah.
not everybody else might know what that means. So please just explain that term, because I love it.
I do too. I learned about grokking from a wonderful soul astrologer called whose name is Elias Lonsdale. And grokking is a way for energy to transmit into your body. And then it infiltrates your mind, spirit, emotional, to inform you. It informs you about life. So you don't have to have somebody actively yelling at you with words. It's not words, because everything is tonality, really. Even our words have a tone to them. So that's what I mean by grok. Kids are so, amazing. You can say a cuss word in front of a 3-year-old, and the next thing you know, they're off using it, and they use it in the right context, right?
So
and
true.
and then you're blown away. You're like, whoa. So that's a good example of grokking. Not that I would want my 3-year-old to, cuss,
They
but
pick up everything, the spoken
they,
and the unspoken. But
yeah.
I think we do too, because have you ever gone into a room where, or met a friend who was like really in a sucky mood, and you leave there in their mood? Like, you're like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I feel terrible now.
Yes, exactly. That's another great example of grokking the energy in the environment or with the people that you're with in the moment. Yes.
So I know that we probably can't get to every single way to do this, but can you name just a couple of different methods that people can use to heal their trauma? I think because we're so unique and individual, it's hard to name every single one, but let's just
It's
name a couple.
okay. I mean, I'm just going to go with what comes to mind. One that comes to mind is to journal about your
Ooh.
thoughts. Like, think, yeah, if you like writing, I don't particularly like writing. I'm learning to like writing, and it's growing on me a little bit. But I have found writing at times to be very useful for me when when I am actively working with my trauma, to help me work with it more deeply, to actually heal my relationship to the trauma so that it doesn't weigh me down so much. So I might pay attention to my thoughts, and then I might make journal entries, like around the judgment, for example. Like, wow, I was really judging Susie today and the way her hair looked. Did not like that new haircut. What is this about? Yeah, so it is a spiritual practice. Some people use yoga as a right
Yes.
as a practice for integrating mind, body, spirit. I think, and then also working with practitioners or therapists, whomever you choose, and you can choose both. It doesn't have to be one or the other. I just think my blueprint, my sole purpose was to work primarily with healers, because I am one. I think that had a lot to do with it, because I know some fabulous therapists as well who work wonders with people. So there are lots of different ways to work with trauma. Yeah, but that one's just the first one that came to mind. Journal. I mean, if you're working with yourself, and if you say you can't necessarily afford to work with a therapist or a healer, start asking yourself questions like, who's speaking? Who is the person talking to me right now? Because I have gotten young ages come to me, like my little inner children who would be speaking up, right?
Notice sometimes when I journal, and I'm very much like you, like it's not a daily practice that I do. Like, I used to do it a lot, and I've just recently tried to pick it up again, and just to kind of give me a little bit of an outlet. But I've noticed my writing changes, like the
Oh,
way I make my letters, or yeah, it's very interesting to see like the different kind of writing in my journals, which probably relates a little bit to what part of me is coming out.
that's, gosh, that's not happened for me. That is interesting. And yes, very trustworthy. I believe very trustworthy. The other thing I've learned too, through doing the mediumship and the channeling in the past 4 years, is that spirit does not say shoulda, woulda, couldas to us. Spirit says nice, I mean, really kind, truthful phrases and words. It does not say, well, you're a failure. Well, you should be doing this or that. That if you're getting those kind of messages as a person who's working their trauma, that's part of your own internal wiring system that hopefully you're going to be rewiring, because spirit is very encouraging, very, very encouraging. I can't emphasize that enough. They want us to succeed in becoming ourselves.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think for a long time, the intuition that us women have, us humans have, has been probably ridiculed and cast aside. And I think that, moms know it best about their kids. Like, we usually get feelings. And I think that if we learn to trust those a little more, that there's a lot of bits of healing in those messages that you get, those feelings that you get,
Yeah, a lot, a lot. And we're being asked, because sometimes I struggle with this, we're being asked to be human beings here and have a human experience. And then at the same time, we're being asked to, hey, heal your trauma, notice what's going on within you, align to your higher self or your soul body or your blueprint. Like, you can let this stuff go and it doesn't define you anymore, because if you don't clear it out, it's going to be like carrying around 110-pound weights behind you as you're trying to walk forward. So healing the past to free you up more for the present, and also the future, to invite the future in, which the future would be the unknown. So befriending the unknown. And just, yeah, it's pretty fantastic. Some of it is for me. When I really think about it, I'm like, wow, it blows my mind in a good way.
So how can people work with you? What do you got going on now, Jan?
What I got? Well, we've been in COVID mode in 2020. I'm primarily seeing people over the phone or via FaceTime or Skype, or I haven't ventured into Zoom yet. But yes, I do individual sessions over the phone. I can see people in person too, if they're okay with that, knowing about COVID. But I work with people to help them where they feel stuck or lost, or they've got a part of life that feels out of balance. They call on me to provide non-dual Kabbalistic healing sessions or energy healings. Sometimes it's mediumship readings and channeling. Yeah. So I'm available for any and all, and and I love doing it. I love doing all of it. I had been telling myself, like, you need to choose one, and there is no choosing one.
Toolbox. It's just different.
Yeah, it's just my toolbox. See, that was one of the ways I got stuck, thinking that, oh, maybe I just need to be a medium channel. But really, I'm a healing practitioner, and in my toolbox, there are these different modalities that I can use to help people find their way, basically, and feel grounded and connected to themselves in life, not to everybody else in life, but to themselves and their truth in life. So, but primarily I do it through the non-dual Kabbalistic healing and the energy healing sessions that I do with people. And a lot of times mediumship will come in and other channeled messages from spirit. It just naturally happens. And I will say this, starting in October, I'm going to be joining forces with my friend Vicki Evans, and we are actually starting a new women's group called Soul Weaving, and it is about awakening and awareness. So we're going to be meeting once a month via Zoom to start with, and covering different topics that prevent us from being fully who we are meant to be. And I don't know what that is for everybody else. I only know it for me, but I'm glad to be a facilitator to help other people on their journey, because we'll be talking about a lot of different topics, but the first one in October is going to be about awareness.
Awesome.
Awareness, like raising your awareness.
Because I was going to ask if you were doing anything online in a group form.
Well, this is me again showing up. Last year, I know I did the Divine Feminine Within, and something just didn't feel right for me with that. I loved doing it, but it also shook me up in a lot of ways, and I was learning a lot myself. Spirit was teaching me a lot. And this year, COVID gave me an opportunity to go deep into my cave and my lab and just explore and clear out more to free me up to come back and do a collaborative event. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I mean, yeah, it's like, and I'm glad, I just feel so much gratitude about life these days, and being in life, and excitement for helping other people who want to feel more joy and abundance in their life.
Oh,
yeah.
I love it.
It's possible. I mean, I know it took me 60 years, you know, it's a long time, but hey,
Time
it takes us,
anyway.
right. It takes as long as it takes, right? That's what I say. Takes as long as it takes. And as long, and I'll just say this too. Tiny Buddha says, you got to feel it to heal it.
Ah, yes.
And I do believe that. You got to feel it to some degree to heal it. You don't have to feel all of it, but you got to feel to heal. Yeah. And that's just a beautiful saying to me. It speaks to my own healing journey.
Yes,
Yeah.
I love that. I'm going to put the links for your website and the group with Vicky in the comments
Okay.
when I post this. So
Okay. Thank you. Yes, we're going to be posting the detailed information shortly, within a week. Yeah.
well, thank you so much, Jan.
Oh my gosh, thank you. So appreciate it. I love you. It is okay to say I love you.
You.
And I'll see you soon.
Okay, perfect.